Even if you are not ready for the day, it cannot always be night.
Sir, flex I do work. Work 6 of 'em like Mike. He's out of sight. Whoa, you done got me pipe. You man like Ike. 6 out the spot.
Into the night.
Yeah, I'm shaking the drop. I'm still up on top. I been had the bop. The devil my op. Can't pay me to stop. My God at the top. We gon' praise our way out the grave, dog. Living, speaking, praise God. Walking out the graveyard, back to life. I serve, follow your word. See with new sight.
Into the night.
What are some of the major problems with the Big Bang Theory? Because I'm sure you hear them a lot.
Yeah, the Big Bang, it's not really much of a theory. I guess you could call it a model, because it doesn't really make testable predictions about the universe, at least that have been specific and successful. Some people think that the Big Bang predicted the cosmic microwave background. I'll sort of grant that, but it wasn't a very specific prediction, because the temperature that it predicted went from 1 degree Kelvin to 50 degree Kelvins, and the true answer of 3 Kelvins is in the right ballpark. But there was, it's like predicting that something will happen tomorrow, and then something happens tomorrow, and you say, see, that's evidence for my hypothesis. Maybe not so much. It doesn't make specific testable predictions that have been vindicated. And in fact, it predicted variations in the cosmic microwave background that are orders of magnitude larger than what we actually see. So it didn't even predict the right kind of microwave background. So it doesn't make good, successful predictions. It's remarkably complicated in terms of all the band-aids they've had to add to it to get it to be consistent, at least somewhat, with the observable universe, like inflation. If you've heard of inflationary Big Bang, that's a patch to try and explain why we don't have monopoles and why the universe has a sort of what we call a flat topology to it. But the Big Bang didn't predict any of those things. So it doesn't make good, it's not a good theory at all. It's at best a hypothesis. And in terms of problems, it's got all kinds of problems with it. One that I like to mention, just because it's easy to understand, it's called the baryon asymmetry problem, or the baryon number problem. And basically, the way you remember this is you ask the question, where's the antimatter? We can make matter on Earth from energy. We can't make matter from nothing. Only God can do that. But we can take energy from collisions of particles at extremely high speeds, close to the speed of light in particle accelerators. And from that energy, we can create new particles. But every time you do that, you also get an antiparticle. So if you make an electron, you'll also make a positron, an anti-electron, which is the same as electron, but the charges of the particles are reversed. And so according to the Big Bang, the entire universe was originally energy. And then as it cooled, it became, some of that energy became matter. But the problem is, according to everything we know about physics, you should get an exactly equal amount of antimatter. But when we look out into the universe, we find it's essentially matter only. There's only trace amounts of antimatter anywhere in the universe, and they're always produced locally anyway and almost immediately destroyed, because when matter and antimatter touch, they tend to annihilate each other and release energy, especially in the form of photons. But so the fact that our universe is matter only it indicates that it was created not by a natural process, but by a supernatural process, because every natural process that converts energy into matter also produces an equal amount of antimatter. And that problem has not been solved in the secular worldview. I mean, there are proposals for it. The latest idea is that, well, every now and then, one time out of a quintillion, when energy becomes matter, there's no antimatter produced. It's matter only.
The Big Bang Theory. What do you think about the Big Bang Theory, Iger? Do you think that it could be, it's logical, at least, to believe such a thing?
Well, to be fair, I believed in it over 35 years of my life. It wasn't until I realized that, until I started questioning all these things that I began to understand that it's a set of lies by basically by secret societies. The Big Bang was made by the Jesuit priest George Lama Atre. It's not anything occult. You could just look it up. Who came up with the Big Bang? And so it's it's a lie, bro. It's a lie in order to destroy God.
Now, you said it took you a minute to like understand that it was a lie. Now, does that mean that you were basically not even looking into it for a long time, and then when you did look into it, it blew your mind? Or does this mean that you were like researching it and it took you 2 years of research to come to the conclusion that it was wrong?
No, once I started to see, it's kind of like the you ever heard that term when the scales start falling out of your eyes?
Yeah.
We're lied to so much. We're blinded by all these scales. So, but once it's almost like like a house of cards, where once one of the scales comes off, then you start to see a bunch of different lies. So evolution's a lie. The Big Bang's a lie. The spinning ball, even for me, is a lie. So it's just a set of lies that are there to destroy the Bible without burning it.
The Big Bang Theory. It's actually a big dud because it didn't happen, as Hovind would say.
I like that. The big dud theory.
Yeah. Table 1.4, examples of scientific theories. That's totally bogus because science is what we can know by testing, observation, and demonstration, and what they say about the Big Bang Theory has nothing to do with science. It says that it literally says here, even though atheists will say that it wasn't an explosion at all, it says right here in a high school textbook, 2019 or 2020 edition, the universe originated with an explosion, continues to expand. So there you have it. That's even what National Geographic and the Discovery Channel are saying. But you talk to an atheist and describe the Big Bang Theory to them, saying how it was an explosion from a dot smaller than a period on a page, expanding into the total, extension of the whole observable universe that we see today. They'll say that it wasn't an explosion. It was just an expansion. So they want to put different vocabulary on it to make it sound less stupid than it actually is. But here's a textbook right here just coming out with it, It's an explosion. And by definition, a rapid expansion is an explosion, FYI.
But basically there's just chaos, and here we are. So look, this is China. This is Japan. This is the ancient Greeks. Those were three pretty big civilizations. They covered a large population, a large number of people, and they were teaching something very similar to the Big Bang Theory. You say, why? Because the Big Bang Theory did not start in the 1920s. It's just repackaged and slightly changed, and science wants you to think they're becoming so educated because they want to deny the existence of God. So myth number one about the Big Bang Theory is that the Big Bang Theory is a new theory that's less than 100 years old. It's actually just the same repackaged garbage that people were teaching from the beginning. Right, since the very beginning, 6,000 plus years ago. And so myth number one is that the Big Bang Theory is a new theory. Myth number two is that the Big Bang Theory started everything, or that the Big Bang Theory, the leading scientists believed it started everything. They never believed that the Big Bang Theory was actually the start of everything. They thought the Big Bang Theory was the origin of the universe. But they're being very misleading, because when a normal person hears the origin of the universe, we're thinking, okay, this is the origin of everything and there was nothing before that. That's actually not what they were saying. They were just being misleading with their words. Now, I'm sure many science teachers would have been vainly repeating this without understanding that they're being lied to, and they don't understand what's actually being taught at the high levels of this damnable sort of idea. But they always understood they have a logical inconsistency, because if the Big Bang starts at this point, what came before that point? And they never had an answer to that. And they understood that they never had an answer to that. So that's something they always had a problem with. So they've started to change the theory through time with the Big Bang Theory. One thing they teach is that there is just kind of oscillation that occurs, where basically, you know, the universe is this big, and then it becomes this big, and it becomes this big, and it becomes this big. So they'll say, well, the Big Bang Theory was 18 to 20 billion years ago, and that's the origin of the universe. But this Big Bang Theory has happened many times before. So they don't actually believe it's the origin of everything, because scientists or atheists, they like to say, well, wait a minute, where did God come from? But they can't answer where the world came from. They can't go to the very beginning, and they understand that. Even with the Big Bang, they're explaining that they think the Earth is 4.6 billion years old, the universe is 18 to 20 billion years, but they have a logical inconsistency there. The Big Bang Theory, number one, it's not a new theory. Number two, they never believed it actually started everything. They always understood they have a logical inconsistency. They just avoided that. And number three, the Big Bang Theory is not scientific or mathematical at all. Now, this is already a long video, so I don't want to go through all the facts, but there are just a million logical inconsistencies with the Big Bang Theory, a million things that don't make sense at all. One thing I wanted to mention is that the Big Bang Theory would contradict the law of the conservation of angular momentum. This is something you learn in physics class very early on, and it's interesting because these head people that are supporting the Big Bang Theory and promoting it, these are people that are physicists. And it's like, you know what, in their early classes that already contradicted, you know, basically their early classes of the law of the conservation of angular momentum. God's taking them in their own craftiness, as the Bible says, that just shows their foolishness. But the law of the conservation of angular momentum is basically that, you know, the spin or the rotation of an object is not going to change unless there's something to redirect it. And so a dictionary definition I have here is the law of conservation of angular momentum states that when no external torque acts on an object, no change of angular momentum will occur. In addition to that, you need to have basically a frictionless environment. So if all of the matter was condensed into the size of a dot, and everything was just in this small little dot, which is what they'll say in these science books, and basically it just kind of explodes, then everything should be rotating in the same direction. It's like, for example, if you're on a merry-go-round, is the example I've heard, and you have, you know, it's spinning, it's spinning, and spinning, and then a couple kids let go. Their spin is going to maintain in the same direction as they fly off. They're not going to start spinning the other direction. They're going to fly off, but their spin stays in the same direction. It's the law of the conservation. The angular momentum is conserved. And so here's the thing. If the Big Bang Theory happened, everything should be rotating in the same direction, okay? Well, here's the thing. Not all planets actually rotate in the same direction. Now, 7 of the planets actually rotate counterclockwise on their axis, but Venus rotates clockwise, and then Uranus basically rotates on its side. And so not all of the planets actually rotate in the same direction on their axis. And there's also many moons that rotate in different directions. And you say, why? Why would that be the case? Like, what's the purpose of that? Well, I believe that God is just trying to make the Big Bang Theory look stupid. That it's not scientific. It breaks basic laws of math and logic and science. There's many ways that it is actually disproven. And so look, this is not a scientific theory. It's a religious theory. They're trying to explain away the existence of God, and this is the best they've got. You say, why don't they have some other theory that's coming out here? They don't have anything better. And they've been teaching this for thousands of years, going all the way back to China, Japan, Greece, and look, I'm sure all over the world. And what we're seeing is a rise of atheism, a rise of God haters as we're getting closer to the end, and we're going to see a rise in just foolishness. And they want to explain away the existence of God. And look, this is the best theory they have. And look, they think that they're so wise. They look at the Big Bang Theory and they're like, this is so intelligent. It makes perfect sense. We have all these equations. And then us as Bible-believing Christians, we look at them that say they're so wise, and they're actually the biggest fools in the world. They look at us, and they think we're foolish to believe in a creator God. But we look at them, and we're like, man, it's pretty foolish to say that everything was just condensed into the size of a dot, and it just exploded, and then just here we are today. It's ludicrous. It doesn't make any sense. The Big Bang Theory is just a complete hoax. It's garbage, and the end goal is to try to say the universe is eternal, to explain away the existence of God.
What do you think, Iger? Do you think that the universe began with an explosion?
I used to believe that it came from a nothing explosion, the size of a period, 14 point, what is it, 13.8 billion years ago or something like that. I forget, they change the numbers all the time, but yeah, I used to believe that too. But now, man, I take the literal viewpoint of the Bible, where basically everything was made by God in 6 days. The earth was here on day 2, the trees on day 3, the sun, moon, and stars weren't here until day 4. So it's a complete reverse order from the Big Bang evolution narrative to the first page of the Bible creation narrative.
Well, let's think outside of the box here, okay? Because we're narrow-minded creationists, Iger. We need to think, right? That's what they say. Let's think.
All right.
Is there evidence for something? I mean, anything. 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 A finger? A little speck of dust. Anything bigger than a subatomic particle coming into the observable sight of a human eye from nothing.
Well, funny you say that, because every time I drive to work, I'm always so scared that nothing might explode in the highway. I'm just kidding, bro. Never has there been a nothing explosion in the physical observable world. But yeah, they expect us to believe that it happened 14 billion years ago, and they brainwash it into our brains since we're in kindergarten. So,
I mean, that is a scary thought. What if I told you that a piano exploded and nothing caused it? I was just driving down the road, and there was a piano in the middle of the road, and I almost hit it until it exploded for no reason. And I was good. Just kept driving. That was crazy,
Yeah, bro, it's silly.
I don't understand that. But you believe hundreds of things by faith. You don't even understand that you're believing by faith. You think matter is either eternal or can create itself. Well, that's the two choices. How did matter get here? The world is here. Where did the matter come from? Did it just happen by itself, or is it all just imaginary? We're not really here at all. You're faced with the option of, we're not really here, this is all just our imagination, or it had a beginning, or matter is eternal, which is both of the second two options are in violation of the obvious laws of thermodynamics. Matter doesn't create itself. And everything degrades over time. So either it had a beginning or it didn't. If it had a beginning, then what was before the beginning? I mean, there's so many thousands of things you take by faith. I say in the beginning God, and you say, well, this matter somehow either was always here or created itself. And then this matter somehow became alive. And then this first living thing learned how to reproduce.
But I can't even think of one example in a scientific laboratory anywhere where they ever produce something from nothing. There is little subatomic particles that come in and out of existence. But
I'm starting to doubt those, bro.
Even if you can, which it's a fact. I mean, it happens. But we're talking about. Let me give you an example. There was a horse that recently won the Kentucky Derby, okay, and it was from Oklahoma. So, go Oklahoma! But that Kentucky Derby horse can only go so fast. I mean, there's been billions of dollars that have been spent on breeding faster horses for the Kentucky Derby, but you know that what they'll never be able to do is breed wings on the Kentucky Derby horse so that it can fly around the track and win it in 10 seconds. So if you're going to tell me you can get a little subatomic particle to come into existence from nothing, but you want me to believe that all of the universe did the same thing, well, you're going to have to give me some stronger evidence than a little speck of matter that I can't even see, that's smaller than an atom. You need something better than that. Okay, if you want me to believe a cow can jump over the moon, well, you're going to have to give me a better demonstration than a little skip. Okay, it's going to have to jump a lot higher if you want me to believe, you know, it's a far-fetched imagination. Like, Iger. What's wrong with these people?
I don't know, man. Did you ever believe in the Big Bang, or were you always hip to the lie of it?
No, I've never believed in the Big Bang Theory, but what
No.
happened was I grew up being taught the Big Bang Theory, not liking it, but really having no argument that I could use to refute it. I mean, it was just basically my hands are tied. God is telling me to believe what he said, and the science teacher, or at least the science textbook, is telling me something else. Because most public school teachers, even though they have a science textbook that teaches evolution, they won't teach it because they're Christian themselves. That's most Americans, okay? A lot of people are Christians, but that's beside the point. What I saw in the world was that, you know, the powerful and the intelligent, what they seem to believe is not what the Bible says. Because that's what I saw in my science textbook. So I'm just gonna, I mean, if you're in first grade or second grade or even in high school, you really don't know a lot about the world. So you're just assuming that, you know, what they're teaching you in the science book is correct. If there's thousands of scientists out there from all over the world that all agree with this theory, well, then it must be true. And then, you know, you see the other side, and there's one of two choices. Once you're introduced to creationism, is to keep believing the propaganda or to study it for yourself. And I think that the atheists are just continually swallowing the lies, and they want other people to swallow the same lie. Not because it's true, because they haven't even investigated it, in all honesty. Not with true diligence, they have not investigated it. I was going on a rabbit trail there. But the Big Bang Theory, we're trying to be open-minded, Iger, so no evidence of not even a speck of dirt coming into existence from nothing. Let's talk about cosmic microwave background radiation, okay? It's supposed to be a glow that exists on the outskirts of the universe. And this is supposed to be the leftover heat that the Big Bang produced. So, with that, and with Hubble's law, the expansion of space, we know that it's expanding. We know there's a lot of leftover heat on the very outside of it. Well, then it must have began from a single point. But is that describing an action of nothing? Is nothing causing this gigantic explosion? Because again, it doesn't happen today. Or is that describing the nature of creation event of the cosmos? Because that seems more logical that something would create it, seeing as how it doesn't happen today. Right? Like, if there's leftover heat, and if we know that the universe is expanding, Well, we know it had a beginning. We know it had to come from a single point. You know, we're not necessarily denying that there was an explosion. We're denying that the explosion came from absolutely nothing, because that is stupid to believe that that would happen. That's what the Big Bang Theory teaches. If the Big Bang Theory would include God, maybe it would be called by some other name. But the Big Bang Theory specifically teaches that this rapid expansion happened, or it was caused, from nothing. The first law of thermodynamics says that matter cannot be created or destroyed. So this theory is not scientific right from the beginning. And you don't have to go into the CMB or Hubble's law, or the fact that we've never produced a single speck of matter from nothing. You could just look at the first law of thermodynamics, and it would tell you that, you know, these guys that have, you know, more degrees to their name than a thermometer know absolutely nothing about science. Because if they did, they would know that the Big Bang Theory is not true, and it would never have stood a chance of being published. What do you think about that, Iger? Agree or disagree?
Yeah, man. I honestly even feel bad for these people sometimes, because especially when you look at the case of like an astrophysicist or something like that, where they went to school and spent $50,000-$60,000 to be indoctrinated to believe in such a lie.
Well, sad, man. Satan's game here doesn't have anything to do with science. Has to do with them being biased toward the God of the Bible. They don't like him. They don't like him telling them what to do. And that's the bottom line every time. I don't like God telling me what to do sometimes, but that doesn't mean that I go invent a theory to deny his existence and then go teach it to children in a public school. I mean, for crying out loud, I'm a saved individual, and I don't always do what God says, because I don't like to do what he says. I'm a sinner, and he punishes me. Okay, but I'll just deny his existence. That's illogical. It's like the clay saying to the potter, "Why hast thou made me thus?" That's what the atheist does. He doesn't realize how foolish that he's being. Big Bang Theory is trash.
Flatness problem and the monopole problem, and inflation attempts to solve at least some of those, but it doesn't solve all of them.
Dr. Law, you're touching on all the best points here. I read about the antimatter problem. I believe it was in your Taking Back Astronomy book. So great answer there. And you also mentioned inflation. Is this their rescue device essentially for what's known as the horizon problem?
That's right. The horizon problem is a light travel time problem that the secular Big Bang, as it originally was proposed, had. And basically the problem is these microwaves, which secularists assume are the leftover radiation from the Big Bang. Well, microwaves, the frequency of those microwaves tells you something about the temperature of their source. And as I mentioned earlier, that microwave background is very uniform. What that means is the source temperature of everything in the universe was originally identical, or very nearly so. The fluctuations are very tiny. And yet in the Big Bang model, when the universe is supposed to have popped into existence, there's a singularity where all of space is contained in a point, and then it rapidly expands out like a balloon. The surface of the balloon represents the 3 dimensions of our space. And there should be hot spots and cold spots. That's just due to the Heisenberg uncertainty principle. You would have to have, because of the small scale, you'd have to have places that are hot, places that have a lot of energy, places that are cool, places that have less energy. The universe rapidly expands out, carrying the hot spots and cold spots far away from each other. But wait a minute, they're all lukewarm now. Okay, all those temperatures have evened out, and yet there hasn't been enough time for light to travel, and therefore energy to travel from the hot spot to the cold spot to even out those temperatures. Right? I mean, if the hot and cold were in contact with each other, they would eventually come to the same temperature, because heat tends to go from hot to cold. That's the second law of thermodynamics. And so you put your ice cube in your hot coffee, eventually you'll end up with lukewarm coffee. They come to the same temperature. but they have to be in contact. They have to be able to exchange energy. And there hasn't been enough time, even if you give them the 13.8 billion years, there hasn't been enough time for light to travel from that hot spot to that cold spot, because they could be on opposite sides of the visible universe. And so the inflation is an attempt to solve that problem, along with the flatness problem and perhaps the monopole problem. But the idea of inflation is that the universe started expanding at what we'll call the slow rate, although it's actually very fast. And then it suddenly ballooned out at a much faster rate. And then that inflation phase, that's the inflation phase. And then that switched off and it went back to the slow rate again. And so the idea is that the hot spots and cold spots could have evened each other out right before this inflation phase pushed them far apart. And I'll grant that that could reduce, maybe even solve the horizon problem, but it introduces other problems of its own, such as what would cause the universe to suddenly expand at a much greater rate. Now, there are hypotheses. It's, well, some kind of symmetry breaking in the laws of physics. And then you got to ask, what would it cause it to, how would it stop everywhere? And how would it know to stop everywhere at the same time? That is a huge problem, because there are still small temperature differences. Even today, there are small temperature differences. And so if it's some kind of symmetry breaking, you would think it would turn off different places at different times, but it didn't. We have kind of a uniform universe. And so that's called the graceful exit problem. So the horizon problem, inflation, an attempt to solve the horizon problem, and then the graceful exit problem is a problem with inflation. And some secularists reject inflation entirely because they realize it has its own issues, and they've proposed alternative solutions to the horizon problem. But I think inflation is still the most commonly accepted secular solution to a problem. But as I said, it's got problems of its own.